know what the culture of the company is. So by being able to identify your own culture, you can figure it out the others.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olsen. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. My guest today is a founding member of Cornerstone International Alliance. She is the dynamic CEO and founder of Delta Business Advisors, Arizona's award-winning boutique business brokerage M&A advisory firm. She loves getting together with her fellow cohorts. She has been a board chair of a board seat of IBBA and M&A Source, and is, like I said, a founding member of our group. And when she's not making deals happen, she'll be hiking, sipping on some great wine, enjoying the outdoors in Arizona, the great weather. And so she's here to talk to us today about, kind of the, what does it look like after the sale of a business owner? What does those conversations look like ahead of time? And really dive into how we can help them, get the right buyer, but also help them set them up for success post-sale. So Lisa Riley is my guest here today. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Nick. It's a pleasure.
And I failed to mention that in my intro that you went skydiving at one point.
Oh, yes. It was quite fun. Have you tried it?
No, I think I'm a little too scared to try it.
You should. There's no...
What advice would you give someone like me if you're scared to go skydiving? Just jump?
Exactly. You'll go in tandem your first time and just let go. Because there's nothing so peaceful after they pull the chute. You're just floating. So very peaceful.
Next time I'm in Arizona, maybe I should try that. I got to imagine that's a really good place to do it too.
It is. Colorado's good. Pretty much anywhere. They have skydiving everywhere. So
yeah. In Wisconsin, you'll just see a bunch of flat ground. A lot of farm fields, a lot of cows. So what got you into being in the M&A space? Why did you start Delta Business Advisors? Why do you love doing this so much?
I actually taught at Creighton University, and demography was one of my areas. So the silver tsunami, the greatest transfer of wealth we know was and still remains to be coming. With that said, most business owners do not understand the value of their business, do not understand the process, and do not understand that the value of their business greatly depends upon the type of buyer. But that structure that buyer type brings into it may or may not match their long-term goals. So as an educator at heart, the more you know, I think the more you can make an informed decision. And like every industry, there are some amazing M&A brokers and advisors out here. And like every industry, there are some that are good and adequate, and there are some that are less interested in the client than themselves. So having that whole spectrum, which is in every industry, by the way, it's just not ours, I figured I really, really want to make sure people get the best help they can.
Because this is a big, pivot point in anybody's, business owner's life, is taking what a lot of these owners' identities are. Their identities have been their business, and they only get one shot at it, and they definitely have to do it right. And if they try to do it alone, outcomes may be not optimal. And so that's where someone like yourself, our listeners, really come into play and really help these people with this life-changing event?
Yeah, it's anywhere from 25% to 33% of business transitions actually succeed. That means there's a whole lot that don't, which is a very personal investment in time, energy, and money on both the business owner who's selling and the strategic or the private equity group or the individual who is buying. It costs. There is a mental cost as well. So if you even think about it, worst case scenario, less than 50% actually do transition. And of those, they don't necessarily transition at the time they want, for the amount they want, or under the terms they want. And all of those are very, very important. But that identity, to take off that identity hat, is critical and needs to be understood before starting the process. Who are you without owning this company?
At what point do you have that conversation with your clients?
When they walk in the door, before we even take them on as a client.
Take us through, what does that conversation look like? What questions you asking? What do you want to understand about that from that conversation?
Really, we really want to focus on why. Why are you thinking about this transition? Why now? What is the motivating reason? And we ask that why question in a variety of ways, because that why has to include what's pulling one away. Because if it doesn't, the identity is still very strongly there. Getting to the root of why and why now focuses on what path we're going. So if somebody wants to retire, as we know, if you're 80 years old, you may want to be looking at retirement, but we have an 80-year-old gentleman who is perfectly willing to stay working. He loves it and he is good at it, and he can be that employee. He doesn't have to be the owner. So again, it depends upon the type of buyer that's looking for that. A private equity group, as you know, looks for a certain management team in place. And if that's not there, the owner may need to stay longer. So it totally depends. If you think you're going to get the most money you can and walk away, that scenario is not happening for 99.9% of business owners. So having those conversations up front, and then asking about hobbies, asking about what they like to do, asking about when their last vacation was, what they did, who they went with, who are their friends. If you cannot name 5 friends outside of your business life, then that's where I say you need to start working on that before we can even think of selling your company. And selling might be to an employee or a child. It doesn't have to be to a third party.
Right. Well, and you just mentioned 2 buyer types: an employee, a child. You got private equity, you got strategic, you got individual, wealthy individual, family office, like all options out there. So where do you start in understanding? So you have that conversation with your client, understand the why. What's your identity going to look like afterwards? What are you going to do? How does that help you in determining? Obviously, let's take the valuation and the business aside, because obviously that plays a role. But take that aside, how do you know, or what is your process of like, yeah, the type of buyer that makes sense in my mind for you is this? I mean, is that kind of where you start thinking about what kind of buyer could be a good fit?
Yes, yes. It's not only what their financials actually suggest. You can be a $2 million company, a $20 million company, a $200 million company in revenue. And there are certain things that you have, buyers you price yourself out of. And, or if you're interested in business legacy and you're at the lower end, you might be an add-on or a bolt-on for a strategic or a private equity. So your legacy might not live on. You might be incorporated into them. If legacy is important to you, that may not be your right type of buyer. By knowing all of these things, is it your employees? Is it legacy? Is it financial. How much money are you going to make and when? Because that number, unless you really want it for bragging rights on the golf course, means absolutely nothing. It's how much you're going to keep of that number. And when you get it, that really makes the difference.
When you get it, how much you're going to net out after taxes,
Mm-hmm.
having that conversation too, right?
Yep. Paying all those liabilities.
So when you understand, so part of this conversation you're having, understanding their reasons, their whys, what their identity is going to look like afterwards. I'm thinking about, the type of buyer. And let's say the numbers make sense. So the valuation adds up and it's a good time to sell. Like what's the next step in your process from there?
Well, we do take them under contract, just like every other firm at Cornerstone International does, and any other good M&A firm. We then start pulling together their team and making sure that they have the right attorney who will actually move the deal forward, the right CPA or accountant who will identify if we need the quality of earnings, if we need an audited financials, what the tax burdens will be of different types, asset or stock sale. What does that mean to them? Start educating along the line, and then identifying and focusing on the type of buyer that is most likely going to buy their business under the terms that they will accept. We have one gentleman who is in his 60s in construction. In Arizona, there are a lot of ESOPs going on, employee stock option purchases. So the ESOPs, he does not like. He does not want a private equity group. He wants another company about his size, so 50 to 80 million in revenue, in another place that wants to get into the Arizona market. That is his goal. So then we pull together a list and we go out and procure that list. We go over the list with them and make sure, that it's a cultural fit, because I don't care what those financials are. If it's not a cultural fit, it's not going to be good for either side. We've seen that in the big businesses. We've seen that in small businesses that blow up. If it's not a good cultural fit, it just doesn't work. So
Yeah, how do you gauge that? How do you judge that if it's a good cultural fit or not? Do you have any things you look at or any tips or tricks that you do to say, yes, I think, or not, this absolutely cannot be a cultural fit? Like, I know it's not. Like, how do you gauge that?
well, just think of the obvious example. And this is one that we did have. A New York accounting firm was looking at growing, and they came and looked at, one of our offices here in Arizona. Suits, ties, the whole 9 yards, everything New York. In Arizona, the office they were looking at acquiring was Hawaiian shirts and shorts.
Very different.
Again, that is just that image, that stark contrast right there. But the other aspect is from simple customer service. How do they customer service responses? Does one have, all the ratings are really positive and good, and one have really negative ratings? That can be turned around, but there might be more issues going on. So you've got to, lift up the hood, so to say, and look under it at that.
Are you talking, at what stage are you talking about that happening right now in the process? Is that before you go to market? Is this that?
As early as possible, we start looking at the cultures and we identify our client's culture
Their
of what
culture
they
first.
have, identify it, and then we start looking out at others as well. And we show them, we say, this is the culture of this company, this is the culture. Which ones do you want us to go to first?
So you're taking culture into account even before you create a buyer's list.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important?
Because our clients are actually focused on typically the employees, the legacy, longevity, something along those lines. And if those things are the important, then the culture is the important, way up there. If financials are important, nobody gets to go without getting what they need to make their next chapter in their life or all future chapters worthwhile. If the financial doesn't work for whatever, it doesn't matter.
Right.
But 9 times out of 10, our clients are just as focused on either employees or legacy.
And excuse me. So you're doing that before, because some people take the approach of creating a buyer's list, like more is better. Like I'll put it out to anybody and everybody who's going to listen. Sounds like you don't take that approach. I would imagine, it's a lot of, noise that you're sifting through in that approach. And I would imagine there's not as much alignment on some of the NDAs you get back. Would you agree?
Yes, but again, our goal is to meet all of our clients' goals. So do we throw it out there if need be? Yeah. If we can't find it, yes, it goes to the broader market because their whole goal is to exit on certain terms. The terms are the most critical. But if we can find them a good match without wasting their time or somebody else's who's not a good fit, that's why people come to us. So we find that fit and we move them along the process. That does 3 things for us because we've done that good pre-due diligence. It typically gets us through due diligence to the closing table in a timelier fashion, as well as on the buyer that they want at the right time, under the right structure.
This episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. When you go through LOIs, you get, let's say, 4, 5, 6 LOIs or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Are you doing anything different at that point, or re-engaging your client in those conversations about fit, culture? And is there anything extra you do because now they've sent in an LOI, like now it's real, it's getting real fast? Anything else you do differently, or how do you handle, looking at the 5 LOIs you received and looking at culture?
Well, the LOIs, and this process we just did recently that worked relatively well. We asked for, because our client was so focused on finding the fit that matched his employees, because the manager had been with them since they started. The manager was 15, 20 years younger, still was going to be there and be part of it. So the fit was critical. So we also, in the LOI stage, we just flat out said, you'll have a better chance if you provide, the top or do this. It was culture index, so we hired culture index and they did the culture index. And then my client got to take a look at all of them and see which ones fit better. Now, the one that fit the best wasn't the one who ended up getting it, but the other 2 were very similar because, again, you have to do financial, the business, and the terms, and their terms were just better.
Speaking of terms, when you have that conversation with your client, you want to understand their terms. What do you mean by that? And what do you talk about?
First and foremost, the structure, an asset or a stock sale. There are reasons for both, depending upon contracts and so on. That, of course, affects taxes and tax consequences, liabilities, and all of these other stuff. So it's the amount. The other terms are how long or if the business owner needs to be part of the business. Is it for 2 years, 1 year, 3 years? And what that structure entails. Is the owner coming into the office? Are they just doing consulting? What does this entail? Or do they get a seat at the board? What does this mean? How much do they have to keep? If it's a strategic or a private equity coming, do they get a bite of the apple in the future? Do they understand what that is? If they keep 5%, 15, 20%, Do they understand what that really means or does not mean for them? If there is an earnout, if that earnout never comes, is it okay? Because you have no control over it, typically, 9 times out of 10. If there are notes, if there, all of the things that come into playing, if the key employees have golden handcuffs and what happens if one of them leaves, all of those terms that we don't even think about from an owner perspective, and even our perspective, we don't know what all the terms are, but the more we can figure out that our client wants, the most critical, those are the ones we have to end up with no matter what.
And, as you're negotiating with a buyer based on those terms, obviously depends on what they are and how hard you want to push and how important they are to your client, I would imagine, right?
Exactly.
And do you have an example maybe of a term that you really had to like push for, fight for your client when maybe the buyer was a little resistant to it or, something like that, but you're like, this is really important to my client. And if you want to be successful or you want to win this, like we kind of have to have this. Do you have something that you've dealt with in the past that kind of aligns with that?
Oh, it was a long time ago on a smaller deal, but one of the biggest things was our client was selling 5 dry cleaners. And one of the buyers who was adding them on figured out very quickly that he just wanted to be able to come in, have his office, which was there, and talk to the customers. That's what he'd been doing for the past 4 or 5 years. Management were all there doing it. So the highest, again, the company that did a higher amount did not get it because this strategic figured out and we were very honest with both. We said, hey, he has been here coming into the office, his office, for the past 5 years, just talking to customers. This cannot hurt you in any way. And it would probably make the deal go much smoother for getting his buy-in. One of the 3 buyers heard that. And so in their LOI, they wrote in, he could keep his office, he could come in as long as he what. They started with a 2-year, and then they said, we can extend it as needed. He stopped going in after 1.5 years, but he got what he wanted.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying 2 out of the 3 buyers didn't hear that? Like this one buyer heard that and that's how they came out ahead. It's very interesting.
So you got to listen. You have
I was
to
going to say,
you have to know. And we couldn't quite say, you have to leave him in the office. We just basically said, this person has been coming here for the past 4 or 5 years talking to customers. We think it'd probably be in your best interest if you kind of considered something like that.
Yeah, right. Dangling the carrot out there and not saying, hey, you have to do this, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. But so the buyer, yes. Make sure, like I said, you're listening and paying attention to the details. And so anything you guys are doing, so you pick an LOI, you're kind of at that point tied to that buyer. Anything that you see commonly that, that comes out from just a match perspective of anything that you look for or happens during that due diligence stage where either reinforces what you thought about culture and, and connection or maybe not. Are you still kind of looking at that stuff as you're going through this process? I mean, you're not saying, well, it's perfect, like we're good, but you still probably are keeping your pulse on that during due diligence, I would imagine.
Yes. And if it's, as again, a strategic or private equity, our client will go and basically do due diligence on the other company as well.
Right.
It is not a one-way street in due diligence, but that is when the culture will really come out.
Mm-hmm.
And those conversations, those dinner conversations, informal conversations, tend to get you more information than a call like this on Zoom,
Right.
or anything.
What about even looking at fit during like the management meetings? Is that something? What about is that an opportunity to think about that as well?
Mm-hmm. We were advising one high-level manager who was a friend of mine, by the way, let me preface it, and their company was being acquired by a strategic private equity acquisition. And of course, the owner said, no, we can do this all by ourselves. I sat down with her and the CFO because they were going to buy it as well. They were going to do an internal buyout, but the owner said, no, wanted to go that way. The CFO knew that there would be no place for him at the new company. And she had been running this company for the past 8 to 10 years. And so, like all good advisors, you just say, okay, these are the things you need to look out for in X, Y, and Z. She did the management meetings and we actually went through it with her. And I said, now, when you're there, you need to be interviewing them as well because you're going to be working with them. How are they doing it? And the dog and pony show was really good because everything about the companies said their two cultures did not fit or work well together. And they still went down. Sure enough, before the owner got his earnout, she was leaving the company, and they had been pushing her out because there was truly no place for her in the new company. Like all good things, she went and started a company because she didn't, they didn't have her do a non-compete or anything because I said, here's your attorneys, you want to do this. Make sure you're not signing a non-compete. So if you don't like it, you can go and start your own company.
And
that
good
is
advice.
exactly what she did.
Yeah. Very interesting. And how long ago, how long after, was that after the sale that happened or during due diligence?
It was after the sale.
Mm-hmm.
But the red flags were waving loud and clear during due diligence from our conversations with.
Yeah. And so when you saw those red flags from her perspective, was she aware? Was she nervous? Because obviously she stayed with it for a little bit, right?
She was aware, but she'd been at the company for 30 years as well.
That's her, yeah.
And was good friends with and she actually said to me, everything you said, everything came true. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But those are the things, again, and he was concerned about his employees.
Yeah.
The owner was actually really concerned and devastated when this happened. But unfortunately, it is a common occurrence, as you know. You've heard. Oh, yeah. We've talked about these stories
Many stories. So what are some, just some maybe two or three things that you would recommend, our listeners to know about, identifying buyer types that match your client's goals? Anything like, what are some common themes that you always say, these are the 1, 2, 3 things that I always look for, I always do in every deal to make sure that there's a good, match.
Hey, most people work with or do business with people, as you've all heard, like, and trust. If there is not that, and there is not the prerequisite of understanding how a company has done business before or how they're doing now, then dig into that. So first and foremost, identify your own culture. And owners may or may not know, by the way, what the culture of the company really is. Key management may or may not know, but those people working client-facing, customer-facing, or in the background, they know what the culture of the company is. So by being able to identify your own culture, you can figure it out the others. So first and foremost, know what that is. Second, what you can do is figure out what type of buyer. You can look on ChatGPT, Google, anything. Look at strategic, private equity, individual, and see what terms are typically associated with them. Do you want to keep working for 2 to 3 years? Do you want to be done fairly quickly? If you want to be done fairly quickly, a strategic in the same industry or a competitor who may or may not pay as much, but they know the business and would not necessarily need to keep you. So your culture and knowing what you most want out in the future are the two top things to be thinking about. I say on the day you start your business, if you didn't think about it then, the next best day is today.
Right.
But definitely before you go to sell. And that sell can be transitioned to the children. It can be to the employees. It can be partial sales, lots of things. And sell is in quotes because you need to make money from your lifelong endeavor.
And I mean, I would think, talk about goals being aligned and, it has to make, you talk about financial, it has to make financial sense for you as to get what you want out of the business, personally and professionally as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I would imagine that's part of your process as you're looking for alignment or match with the buyer. And, probably one of the most important things is just to make sure that you get out what you need and want and it's structured the right way. And what you're going to do after the sale is being, you're able to live that way based on the proceeds that you get from the business. And like you said, do you want to stay in for 2 years? Are you want to getting it out sooner rather than later? Are you okay being a consultant? Are you, fine being in the business in the office every day? Like all those things play a factor and not just, I got this amount of money for my business and that's it.
Exactly. You got to meet all the goals, and there are a lot of them, and some you haven't even thought about. For
Yeah.
example, do you have children working? Do you have a customer concentration? Are they all your really good friends? Do you get a little kickback from your vendors?
As we were talking, I was going through my mind. I didn't ask it, but I want to make sure we cover it real quick. Is the business owner? It's an important decision for him or her, but also, I would imagine you take this approach, Lisa. But having a conversation or including the spouse in the whole process, especially, I would imagine on the front end of getting alignment and what you both want out of the business and what you both want after the sale. How do you go about including the spouse in the equation?
Even if we were not a community property state, which we are here in Arizona, all partners, and that is spouses, are included in our conversations up front before we even sign any type of engagement agreement. Because if their goals aren't in alignment, then it doesn't matter. We can bring an amazing deal to the table and one party can just shoot it down. And all that work, again, and all time, energy, and money invested by all parties is for naught, not to mention the lawsuits that might follow. So, yes, spouses, partners, everybody is
Kids?
signing on the dotted line. Kids, if they are important, yes. And kids, if they are managing or if they are in key parts of the business, most definitely.
Yeah, it just makes so much sense because far too often you hear about things come up in a deal that maybe you didn't address early on.
Mhm.
The last thing you want to have happen is business owner ready to go, but then the spouse raises concerns or wasn't in alignment or didn't know about something and that pops up mid process. Like I can't imagine that's ever a good situation.
No, and the other thing is figuring out what on the balance sheet and or in the income statement is really discretionary or more personal. 9 times out of 10, vehicles, family vehicles, sometimes, you know, children are on the payroll and they might not be doing much of anything. So identifying all of the benefits it gives to your family is critical up front, and that both parties are aligned with that. And that the proceeds and the future lifestyle does not take a hit.
Right. Yeah, like, that's a good point. Running, you got those discretionary things you're running through the business. Now your business goes away. You're going to have to start personally paying for them. Like, what does that look like? How's
Hmm.
that going to affect you? And all those sorts of things. Because I would imagine, the not so great advisors out there. If you missed that conversation and talk about, being happy post sale with everything. Oh, now I got to pay, for my vehicles. Like I never had to do that before.
For my gas, for my health care, for my dental
Yeah,
care.
yeah.
Yeah.
all that stuff. So I think the bottom line is, and Lisa, thank you for all your insights here, and all your expertise in this, because, you know, make sure you're in alignment with your clients, make sure your clients are in alignment with their goals, and it's all out on the table early, and all with the goal of being in alignment with whatever buyer you choose to purchase your company on, alignment on, the financials, the post sale, like what are you going to do? Maybe you're going to, the structure and the terms, all that sort of stuff. It plays a huge factor in whether or not the sale is successful. And I think someone like yourself, Lisa, who can quarterback all of that for your clients is vitally important, and why, M&A advisors and investment bankers, and we all exist to help these business owners not have to think about it on their own. We think about those things for them and walk them through it, but make sure we're all in alignment and make sure that everything is in line to have a successful post close life as well.
Because nothing matters if you regret that decision of selling, or if it does not meet your lifestyle. So
Right. Very important.
we want you to be happy. We want you to be engaged. And I can tell you, and you'll like this one, Nick, if your goal is to golf every day, that will not be fulfilling.
No, it won't. It's funny how many people think that just by the stories I hear, and people try it, and it's like, you can only golf so much in the course of a week. Unless you're going to become like a professional golfer, you're not going to do it.
Yep. So what's going to get you out of bed every morning?
Yep.
That's what you got to have something that's going to be like, I want to do this. Because that's what you've been doing for 10, 15,
for many years,
30, 50 years.
Yep. Last question. What's your take on, you mentioned the silver tsunami at the beginning. When is the big wave going to come through? 3 years, 5 years, 2 years? Take out your crystal ball for me.
I think if you really stop and think about it, everybody's above, that last baby boomer was born in 1964.
Was that 61 years old?
Mm-hmm. So they might have another 10, 20 years for the youngest ones. But as everybody said, the tsunami being the big waves, I think we see little waves going through, and we've had that at certain times. Because it depends on how prepared one's business is and how prepared one's person is.
Yeah.
Fortunately, what's forcing a lot of the baby boomer businesses for sale that we do not like to see is those deaths, diseases,
health-related issues,
disputes, all of the negative things.
Right.
And we do not like to see that. But I would be remiss and can't get off right now if I don't expect to see a little bit of a tsunami with this AI coming for those businesses that don't want to invest in it, that don't want to go to it. They're better off getting out in the next 3 years or less, because their value will be higher than if they wait too long, if they're just very AI resistant, because it's going to change the entire landscape of every business.
It's here, and it's going to only get more prevalent. That's for sure.
So we might be seeing a mini tsunami here fairly quickly.
Okay. I like it. We'll take us a little abbreviated tsunami here now in the too distant future. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast. I thought it was a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, a lot of great insights, and really appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise. Where can our listeners find you, learn more about you, and connect with you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Nick. And there are lots of places, from our website, deltabusinessadvisors.com, LinkedIn, it's the linkedin.com, riley.lisa. If you do Lisa Riley, you will find 526 of them, plus or minus. Or simply email me, lisa@deltabusinessadvisors.com. Happy to help.
I know you've always been one of our most collaborative members in Cornerstone International Alliance, and always there to help people out. So I appreciate you for that, as I know the people who you help as well. So thank you again, Lisa. Make sure to share, like, and comment on this episode. Pass it on to anybody who you think would benefit here from our conversation. Make sure to subscribe on our YouTube channel. You can find our episodes at all the places, Spotify, podcasts, or Apple Podcast, on our website at Cornerstone. And make sure to tune in every Thursday morning for a brand new episode. Until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.